The guards stood rigid as the transport ship docked with the palace. Their hands gripped their weapons tighter than usual. Some of them were shaking. Everyone knew what was coming through that door, and the knowledge filled them with dread. A human was arriving. Queen Silvara watched from her throne room viewing screen as the airlock opened. She tried to keep her face calm, but her antennae twitched nervously. Her advisors stood behind her, all maintaining a respectful distance from the screen as if the human could reach through it and harm them. "Your Majesty, we still believe this is unwise," said her chief advisor, his voice barely above a whisper. "Humans are dangerous. Everyone knows this." The Queen raised one delicate hand for silence. She knew the stories. Every species in the galaxy knew about humans. They came from a death world called Earth, a planet so violent and hostile that it created the most terrifying creatures known to exist. Humans could eat almost anything. They healed from wounds that would kill other species. They could run for hours without stopping. Their eyes faced forward like predators. They had teeth designed for tearing meat, and worst of all, they seemed to enjoy fighting. The human stepped through the airlock. Daniel Hayes looked around the docking bay with curious eyes. He was tall, much taller than any Velkari. His body was thick with muscle that spoke of his world's heavy gravity. He wore simple diplomatic clothing, but everyone knew what was underneath, a frame capable of crushing Velkari bones with ease. Daniel smiled at the greeting party. Several guards stepped backward. "Hello," Daniel said, his voice deep and rumbling. "I'm honored to be here. Thank you for welcoming me." The dockmaster, a brave Velkari named Kess, managed a shaky greeting. "Welcome, Ambassador Hayes. Please follow me to your quarters." As they walked through the palace corridors, Daniel noticed how everyone reacted to his presence. Palace workers pressed themselves against walls as he passed. Some ran into side rooms and locked the doors. Children playing in a courtyard were quickly ushered away by frightened parents. One elderly Velkari took one look at him and fainted. Daniel's shoulders slumped slightly. He had expected this, but it still hurt. He was here to build bridges between their species, but how could he do that when everyone was terrified to be near him? The quarters they gave him were spacious and beautiful, but they were also in the most isolated wing of the palace, far from everyone else. Daniel understood why, even if it made him sad. He thanked Kess and closed the door, finally alone. That evening, Queen Silvara held the formal reception. It was required by diplomatic protocol, but she had made sure it would be brief. The throne room was full of nobles and officials, all dressed in their finest clothing. They talked quietly among themselves, casting nervous glances at the door where the human would enter. When Daniel arrived, the room fell completely silent. He walked to the center of the room, his footsteps heavy on the polished floor. Every eye watched him. "Some people's hands moved toward concealed weapons, Your Majesty," Daniel said, bowing in the human style. "I bring greetings from Earth and the Human Federation. We hope this meeting will mark the beginning of lasting friendship between our peoples." Queen Silvara responded with the formal words required, but kept her speech short. Around the room, nobles whispered to each other. Some looked at Daniel with fear, others with disgust, none with friendship. The reception ended quickly. Daniel was escorted back to his quarters by a full squad of guards who kept their weapons ready the entire time. As he walked, he passed by a small garden courtyard. He stopped for a moment, looking at the strange alien plants and flowers. Something small and furry scurried across the path, some kind of palace pet or local creature. Daniel knelt down slowly and extended his hand. The creature, looking like a cross between a cat and a rabbit, approached cautiously. Daniel remained perfectly still, letting it sniff his fingers. After a moment, it rubbed against his hand. Daniel smiled and gently petted it, his large hand incredibly careful and soft. "Come along, Ambassador," one of the guards said nervously. "You should not linger in open areas." Daniel stood and continued walking, not seeing the small figure watching him from behind a decorative pillar. Princess Mira had been playing in that courtyard when the human arrived at the palace. Her caretakers had tried to take her away, but Mira was good at hiding and sneaking. She was only 7 years old, but she was clever and curious about everything, and she was very curious about the human. Everyone said humans were monsters. They said humans were scary and dangerous and would hurt anyone who got close. But Mira had just watched the human be gentle with Pip, her favorite garden creature. Pip was scared of almost everything, but he had let the human touch him. The human had smiled, and it was not a scary smile. It was a sad smile. Mira followed at a safe distance as the guards took the human away. She thought about what she had seen. Then she thought about the nightmares she had been having every night since the war. She thought about how her caretakers could not make them go away, no matter what they tried, and she made a decision. Late that night, Queen Silvara was preparing for sleep when her head caretaker rushed into her chambers. The older Velkari looked panicked. "Your Majesty, Princess Mira refuses to sleep. She is making a demand and we do not know what to do." The queen felt immediate concern. "What kind of demand?"
Is she ill?
"No, Your Majesty. She is perfectly healthy, but she insists." The caretaker paused as if afraid to continue. "She insists that she wants the human to tuck her in." Queen Silvara stared at her caretaker in shock. For a long moment she could not speak. "She wants what?" "The human ambassador. She wants him to come to her chambers and tuck her into bed like we do. She refuses to sleep until he does." The queen stood up quickly. "This is madness. She cannot possibly mean this. I assure you, Your Majesty, she is quite serious. We have tried everything to change her mind." Within minutes, the news had spread through the palace. Commander Vex, head of security, arrived at the queen's chambers with a dozen guards. His expression was grim. "Your Majesty, you cannot allow this. The human is dangerous. We cannot let him near the princess." "I know that," the queen snapped, though her antennae were trembling with worry. "But what am I to do? My daughter will not sleep." An advisor spoke up. "Perhaps if we explain the danger to the princess." "Do you think we have not tried?" The caretaker said. "She insists the human is not dangerous. She says she watched him in the garden being kind to Pip." The queen paced back and forth. This was an impossible situation. If she refused her daughter's request, Mira might not sleep for days. The child was stubborn like her mother, but if she allowed a human near her youngest child, the entire court would think she had lost her mind. "Send word to the human ambassador," the queen finally said. "Ask him if he would be willing to do this." Commander Vex looked horrified. "Your Majesty, if he agrees, I will allow it. But I will be present, and you will have guards at every entrance. If he makes one wrong move, your soldiers have permission to act." Daniel received the message in his quarters. He read it 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. A child wanted him to tuck her in. The same species that could barely stand to look at him wanted him near their princess. He thought about refusing. This could go wrong in so many ways. But then he thought about that sad little creature in the garden, and how gentle he had needed to be. He thought about how lonely his first day had been. "Tell Her Majesty I would be honored," he sent back. As he walked through the palace corridors toward the princess's chambers, surrounded by armed guards with weapons pointed at him, Daniel wondered what he had agreed to. But when he stepped through the door and saw the small alien child sitting on her sleeping platform, clutching a stuffed toy and looking at him with curious eyes instead of fearful ones, he knew he had made the right choice. Queen Silvara stood in the corner watching everything. Commander Vex was positioned by the door, his hand on his weapon. Guards lined the hallway outside, and in the center of it all, a human man carefully sat down near an alien child and asked, in the gentlest voice anyone had ever heard from a human, "What story would you like to hear?" Daniel looked at the small princess and waited. Around him, he could feel the tension in the room like a physical thing. Every guard was ready to shoot him. The queen stood frozen in the corner, her body language screaming fear and worry. Even the air felt heavy. But Princess Mira just looked at him with bright, curious eyes. "I don't know any human stories," she said softly. Her voice was high and sweet like a small bell. "Will you tell me one?" Daniel smiled, making sure to keep his lips closed so his teeth would not scare her. "I know a good one. It's about a child who goes on an adventure to a place where wild monsters live." Mira's antennae perked up with interest. "Monsters?" "Yes, very scary monsters. But the child in the story is brave just like you." Queen Silvara watched as Daniel began to tell the story. His voice changed as he spoke, becoming softer and gentler. He used his hands to show what was happening, making his movements slow and careful. He was aware that every gesture he made was being watched and judged. The story was about a young one named Max who traveled to an island of wild things. The creatures there were big and fierce, with terrible teeth and roaring voices. But Max was not afraid. Max became the king of the wild things and had adventures with them. And when Max wanted to go home, the wild things were sad because they loved Max. Why were the monsters sad? Mira asked, her eyes getting heavy with sleep. Because Max showed them kindness, Daniel said quietly. And they learned that even though they looked scary, they could be gentle too. Sometimes the scariest-looking creatures have the softest hearts. Mira yawned. Like you? The room became even more tense. Daniel saw Commander Vex's hand tighten on his weapon, but Daniel just nodded slowly. Maybe like me, he said. I know I look scary to you and your people, but I promise I only want to be friends. I think you're nice, Mira said, her words getting slower as sleep pulled at her. Pip thought so too. He's a good judge of people. Mama says animals always know. Daniel glanced at Queen Silvara, who was staring at her daughter with wide eyes. Your mama is very wise, Daniel said. Now I think it's time for you to sleep. You've had a big day. Mira snuggled into her sleeping platform, holding her stuffed toy close. Will you tell me another story tomorrow? Daniel looked at the Queen, waiting for permission. After a long moment, she gave a tiny nod. If your mother says it's okay, I would be happy to, Daniel said. Good, Mira whispered. Her eyes closed. Within seconds, she was asleep, breathing deeply and peacefully. Daniel stood up very slowly and carefully. He backed toward the door, keeping his movements obvious and non-threatening. When he reached the doorway, he bowed to the Queen and left without a word. In the hallway, Commander Vex and his guards escorted Daniel back to his quarters. Nobody spoke. The guards kept their weapons ready, but Daniel noticed something different. They were not shaking as much as before. Some of them looked confused, as if what they had just witnessed did not match what they thought they knew about humans. Back in the princess's chambers, Queen Silvara stood looking at her sleeping daughter. Mira's face was peaceful and relaxed. The child had not slept this well in weeks. Every night since the war ended, Mira had woken up crying from nightmares. The caretakers had tried everything. Special teas, calming songs, sleeping medicines, extra lights in the room. Nothing had worked until tonight. Until a human had sat beside her and told her a story about monsters who could be gentle. The Queen's mind spun with confused thoughts. Everything she knew about humans said they were dangerous. The war had shown her what they could do in battle. She had seen footage of human soldiers fighting with terrible efficiency, never stopping, never showing mercy to their enemies. That was what humans were: warriors, predators, killers. But the human who had just left her daughter's room had been none of those things. His voice had been soft as silk. His movements had been careful and controlled. He had known exactly how to speak to a frightened child, and he had done it all while surrounded by weapons pointed at him, never once showing anger or frustration at being treated like a monster. Queen Silvara left her daughter's room and went to her private study. She sat at her desk and opened the communication channels to Earth's public databases. If she was going to understand this contradiction, she needed to learn more. What she found surprised her. The human databases were full of something she had not expected: thousands upon thousands of files about caring for children. There were songs called lullabies designed specifically to help children sleep. There were millions of stories written just for young ones. There were detailed guides on how to comfort a scared child, how to help them feel safe, how to teach them to be brave. She found videos of human parents with their offspring. The humans were gentle and patient even when the small humans were difficult or crying. She watched human fathers carefully holding tiny babies, their large, dangerous hands cradling the fragile lives with impossible tenderness. She saw human mothers singing to their children, their predator faces soft with love. There was an entire section on something called tucking in. It was a human bedtime ritual where parents would make sure their children were comfortable and warm, would tell them stories or sing to them, and would stay until the child felt safe enough to sleep. It was considered one of the most important things a human parent could do. The Queen sat back in her chair, her mind reeling. She had spent so much time learning about human weapons and human warfare. She had studied their military tactics and their battle history. But she had never once thought to look at how they treated their own children. Now she understood something new. Humans were dangerous, yes, but that danger came with something else: a powerful instinct to protect and nurture the weak and helpless. The same strength that made them deadly in battle also made them careful with fragile things. They had to be, because their own offspring were born completely helpless and stayed that way for years. A human child could not survive without intensive care for more than a few days. Human parents had to be gentle, patient, and protective for years and years. It was built into their species at the deepest level. The Queen thought about what Daniel had said, that even scary-looking creatures could have soft hearts. Perhaps he had been trying to tell her something about his own people. Over the next few days, word of what happened spread through the palace like fire. Every servant, every guard, every noble had heard that the princess had demanded the human tuck her in, and that the human had done so without any violence or threat. The story grew with each telling, becoming more elaborate and dramatic. Some Velkari were horrified. They insisted the Queen had put her daughter in terrible danger, and that she had been lucky nothing bad happened. The traditionalist nobles whispered that the Queen was becoming weak, that she was forgetting the lessons of the war. But others were curious. They began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they had misunderstood humans. They started looking at Daniel differently when they saw him in the corridors. Instead of running away immediately, some would watch him from a safe distance. Daniel noticed the change. People were still afraid, but now there was curiosity mixed with the fear. Some of the younger Velkari would peek around corners to look at him. When he waved at them, they would dart away, but sometimes they would wave back before disappearing. On the third night after the first tucking in, Princess Mira asked for Daniel again. This time Queen Silvara agreed more quickly. She still insisted on guards and her own presence, but there were fewer weapons pointed at the human. Daniel told Mira a story about a girl who befriended a giant. The giant looked terrifying and everyone was afraid of him, but the girl saw that he was lonely and kind. Together they had adventures and proved that friendship could exist between different kinds of beings. Mira loved the story. "Are you like the giant?" she asked. "Maybe a little," Daniel admitted. "I'm bigger and stronger than you and I look different. But I want to be friends just like the giant did." "We are friends," Mira said firmly, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You tell the best stories. Tomorrow, can you tell me about Earth? I want to know what a deathworld looks like." Daniel laughed softly. "Earth isn't as scary as people think. It has beautiful places, oceans and mountains and forests. I'll tell you all about it tomorrow." As Daniel left that night, he walked past a group of palace workers who did not run away. They still looked nervous, but they nodded to him in greeting. It was a small thing, but it felt like a victory. In her chambers, Queen Silvara thought about what she was seeing. A human was teaching her daughter about friendship and kindness. The same species that had helped them win a war through terrible violence was now showing a different side, one that her people had never imagined existed. She wondered what else they had been wrong about. And she wondered if it was possible for Velkari and humans to truly understand each other, not just as allies in war, but as real friends. Looking at her sleeping daughter's peaceful face, she thought maybe it was. The morning alarm screamed through the palace, sending everyone into immediate panic. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Emergency messages blared from speakers. Environmental failure in Youth Wing. All personnel evacuate. Toxic gas detected. Queen Silvara ran toward the Youth Wing before anyone could stop her. Her daughter was there. Mira had morning lessons with other noble children in that section of the palace. The thought of her child trapped in toxic gas made the Queen move faster than she had ever moved in her life. Commander Vex reached the sealed section first. His team was already there, trying to break through the emergency bulkhead that had automatically closed when the leak was detected. The metal door was thick and heavy, designed to contain any disaster. It was doing its job perfectly, which meant the rescue teams could not get through. "Report," the Queen demanded, her voice shaking. "Mechanical failure in the air processing system," Vex said quickly. The backup systems sealed the Youth Wing to prevent the gas from spreading to the rest of the palace. "There are 8 children trapped inside, including Princess Mira. We're trying to cut through the bulkhead now, but it will take at least 20 minutes, maybe more." "They don't have 20 minutes, the Queen said. Even as she spoke, she could see the readouts on the wall monitors. The toxic gas levels were rising quickly. Velkari could survive maybe 10 minutes in that atmosphere before serious damage occurred. Children would have even less time. "We're going as fast as we can, Your Majesty," Vex said. His crew was using heavy cutting tools on the bulkhead, but the metal was barely showing marks. It would take too long. Daniel heard the alarms from his quarters. He stepped into the hallway and grabbed a passing guard. "What's happening?" The guard, too panicked to remember to be afraid, blurted out, "Gas leak in the Youth Wing. Children trapped, including the princess. We can't get through the door fast enough. Daniel's training from his years as a colony defense coordinator kicked in immediately. Where is it? Take me there now. You can't help, the guard said. The gas will kill. He stopped, remembering what Daniel was. Humans came from a death world. Their bodies could handle toxins that would kill most other species. Follow me. They ran through the corridors together. Daniel's longer legs carried him faster, and soon he was ahead of the guard, following the sound of alarms and the flash of red lights. When he reached the sealed section, he saw Queen Silvara, Commander Vex, and the rescue teams all working frantically at the bulkhead. How long do they have? Daniel asked, pushing through the crowd. Vex looked at him with desperate eyes. 8 minutes, maybe less. We can't cut through fast enough. Daniel stepped up to the bulkhead and examined it. The metal was thick, but he could see the emergency release mechanism. It was designed to be operated from the outside, but the explosion that had damaged the air system had also damaged the release controls. The door was stuck. The gas, Queen Silvara said, grabbing Daniel's arm. If you go in there, I'll be fine for longer than your people, Daniel interrupted. He looked at the monitors showing the gas composition. His mind calculated quickly. His human lungs and blood could process those toxins for at least 15 minutes before serious damage. Maybe 20 if he was lucky. It would hurt, and he would definitely need medical treatment after, but he would live. The Velkari children would not. I'm going in, Daniel said. He pulled off his diplomatic jacket and started wrapping it around his face to filter some of the gas. You can't carry all of them at once, Vex said, even if you get through the door. I'll make multiple trips, Daniel said. His hands were working at the damaged release mechanism, using his human strength to force parts that were bent or stuck. Keep working on cutting through. If I go down in there, you'll need to get me out too. Daniel, wait, Queen Silvara started to say, but the human was already wrenching the release mechanism with both hands. The metal groaned. His muscles strained. Then, with a sound like thunder, the mechanism broke free and the bulkhead began to slide open. Toxic gas immediately poured out into the corridor. The Velkari stumbled backward, covering their breathing passages. Daniel did not hesitate. He walked straight into the poisonous cloud. Inside the youth wing, 8 small Velkari children huddled in a corner, their teacher wrapped around them, trying to protect them with her body. They were all struggling to breathe, their skin turning colors that indicated distress. When they saw Daniel emerge from the toxic fog, some of them screamed weakly. I'm here to help, Daniel said, his voice already rough from the gas. His eyes were watering and his throat burned, but he pushed the pain aside. I'm taking you out of here. Princess Mira recognized him. Daniel, she whispered, barely able to speak. He went to the smallest children first. He scooped up 2 of them, one under each arm, holding them as gently as he could while moving as fast as possible. He ran back through the toxic cloud to the bulkhead where hands reached out to take the children from him. Medical teams immediately began treating them. Daniel did not stop. He turned around and ran back into the gas. The second trip, he carried 2 more children. His lungs were starting to scream at him now. Every breath felt like fire. His vision was getting blurry, but he could still move, still function. The children could not. Third trip. 2 more children. The teacher tried to tell him to take her instead to save himself, but Daniel ignored her. He grabbed the children and ran. His legs felt heavy. His body was fighting the poison in his system, but human biology was stubborn. It refused to quit. 4th trip. The last 2 children, Princess Mira and 1 other child. Daniel's hands were shaking now. His heart was beating too fast, but he held the children carefully, protecting them with his body as he carried them through the gas. As he stepped through the bulkhead, his legs finally gave out. He handed the children to waiting arms and collapsed. Medical teams swarmed over him immediately. They put a breathing mask over his face, pumping clean oxygen into his damaged lungs. They connected monitors to his body, checking his vital signs. The readouts alarmed them. His blood chemistry was a mess, his oxygen levels were dangerous, and his lung tissue was damaged. But he was alive. And so were all 8 children. Queen Silvara knelt beside Daniel, tears streaming down her face. She held her daughter in her arms while watching the human who had saved her. Mira was crying too, coughing and scared but alive. Why? The queen asked, though Daniel probably could not hear her through the oxygen mask and his own pain. Why would you risk yourself for children that are not even your species? But she already knew the answer. She had read about humans now. She understood. This was what they did. When someone needed help, especially children, humans acted without thinking about their own safety. It was built into them at their very core. Commander Vex stood nearby, staring at Daniel with an expression of complete shock. He had spent days believing this human was a threat, someone to be watched and feared. Now he had watched that same human run into certain pain and possible death to save Velkari children without a moment's hesitation. "Get him to the medical center," Vex ordered his troops, "and make sure he gets the best care we have. He's a hero." The word spread through the palace faster than the emergency alarms had. The human had saved the children. The terrifying Deathworld ambassador had charged into toxic gas that would have killed any Velkari in seconds. He had made 4 trips carrying children out 2 at a time until all were safe, and he had collapsed only after the last child was secure. By the time Daniel woke up in the medical center 12 hours later, he was famous. He opened his eyes slowly, his body aching everywhere. The first thing he saw was Queen Silvara sitting beside his bed. She looked exhausted, like she had not slept at all. "The children," Daniel croaked, his throat raw. "All safe," the Queen said quickly. "Thanks to you. Mira has been asking for you every hour. The doctor said you need rest, but she insists on seeing you." Daniel tried to smile, though it hurt. "I'd like to see her too." The Queen's antennae trembled. "Why did you do it? You could have died." Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain something that felt so obvious to him. "They were children," he finally said, as if that explained everything. "And for humans it did. On Earth, when we see a child in danger, we act. Any child. It doesn't matter if they're human or not. Protecting children is the most important thing any adult can do. It's not even a choice, really. It's just what we do." Queen Silvara looked at this human, this creature her people had feared and called a monster, and saw him clearly for the first time. Yes, he was strong. Yes, he was dangerous. Yes, he could kill if he needed to. But all of that power, all of that potential for violence was wrapped around a core of pure protective instinct. Humans were scary, but they were scary in a completely different way than she had thought. They were scary because they would face any danger, endure any pain, and risk any harm to protect those who could not protect themselves. "My people have been wrong about yours," the Queen said softly. "We saw the warrior and missed the protector." "We're both," Daniel admitted. "That's what makes us human. We fight when we must, but what we're really fighting for is the chance to be gentle." Outside the medical center, palace residents gathered in quiet groups. They talked in hushed voices about what had happened. Daniel spent 3 days recovering in the medical center. During that time, the palace transformed around him. The change was subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. On the first day, a palace worker nervously brought him fresh flowers for his room. "Thank you for saving the children," she whispered before hurrying away. By the evening, his room was filled with flowers, gifts, and hand-drawn pictures from the children he had rescued. On the second day, the children themselves came to visit, accompanied by their parents. They were shy at first, hiding behind their mothers and fathers. But Princess Mira, who had visited Daniel every few hours since he woke up, encouraged them forward. "Daniel tells the best stories," she announced, "and he's very gentle. You don't have to be scared." One by one, the children approached. A small boy named Kin touched Daniel's hand carefully, as if expecting it to be hot or sharp. When nothing bad happened, he smiled. A girl named Zara asked if Daniel's world really was as dangerous as everyone said. Daniel told her about Earth's oceans and mountains, making it sound beautiful instead of terrifying. By the third day, when Daniel was cleared to leave the medical center, a crowd had gathered outside to see him. They did not cheer or make noise. Velkari were not demonstrative like humans, but they bowed their heads in respect as he passed. Some reached out to briefly touch his arm or hand, a Velkari gesture of gratitude and trust. Queen Silvara invited Daniel to her private chambers that evening. It was a huge honor, one that had never been extended to any foreign diplomat before. When Daniel arrived, he found the Queen alone, without guards or advisors for the first time since he had arrived at the palace. "Please sit," she said, gesturing to a comfortable chair. "I want to talk to you not as a queen to an ambassador, but as one person to another." Daniel sat carefully. Even after everything, he was conscious of his size and strength, in this space filled with delicate Velkari furniture. "I have been researching your people," the queen began. "Every night since you first tucked Mira into bed, I've been reading everything I can find about human culture, human history, human biology. I am trying to understand something that seems impossible to me." "What's that?" Daniel asked. "How can the same species that fights with such terrible efficiency also be so gentle with children? How can you be both warrior and caretaker? Every species I know is one or the other, but humans seem to be both at once." Daniel thought about this for a moment. "It's because of Earth," he said finally. "Our world is dangerous, you're right about that. When humans evolved, we faced predators bigger and stronger than us. We faced diseases, natural disasters, harsh climates. We should have gone extinct 100 times over. But you didn't," the queen said. "No, because we learned to work together. Humans survived because we protected each other, especially our children. A human baby is completely helpless for years. They need constant care and protection. So we evolved strong protective instincts. We became dangerous so we could protect the helpless." He leaned forward slightly. "That's the key. We're not dangerous because we like violence. We're dangerous because we need to protect what we love. Every human instinct for fighting comes from an instinct for protecting. We learned to be warriors so we could be parents." Queen Silvara absorbed this, her antennae moving in patterns that indicated deep thought. "The predator's paradox," she murmured. "You are gentle because you know exactly how much harm you could cause." "Exactly," Daniel said. "Human parents teach their children about gentle hands and soft voices and inside behavior from the time they're very young. We have to, because even our children are stronger than many adult species from gentler worlds. We learn control early, and we learn it deeply." Over the next few weeks, Daniel's role at the palace expanded in unexpected ways. Queen Silvara formally invited him to stay longer than originally planned. She wanted her people to learn about humans, and she wanted Daniel to learn about the Velkari in return. Soon, Daniel was spending his afternoons in the palace gardens, telling stories to groups of Velkari children. At first it was just the 8 he had rescued, but word spread. Other parents, curious and cautiously hopeful, began bringing their children to listen to the human. Daniel told them stories from Earth, fairy tales and fables, adventures and legends. He taught them simple games that human children played. He showed them how to be gentle with the garden creatures, how to move slowly and quietly so as not to scare them. The children loved him. They started calling him Story Daniel, and would run to greet him when he appeared in the gardens. Their parents watched from a distance at first, then slowly moved closer. Some of them started asking Daniel questions about Earth and humans. One afternoon, Commander Vex approached Daniel in the gardens. The security chief had been avoiding the humans since the rescue, always finding reasons to be somewhere else when Daniel was around. But now he stood at the edge of the garden watching Daniel teach a group of children a hand-clapping game. "Ambassador Hayes," Vex said formally. "May I speak with you privately?" Daniel excused himself from the children and walked with Vex to a quiet corner of the garden. The commander looked uncomfortable, his antennae twitching nervously. "I owe you an apology," Vex said finally. "I treated you as a threat from the moment you arrived. I kept weapons pointed at you, questioned your every move, and assumed the worst of your intentions. Then you risked your life to save our children, including the princess I am sworn to protect. You were doing your job," Daniel said. "Keeping the royal family safe is what you're supposed to do." "But I let fear make me blind," Vex continued. "I have been thinking about something you should know. During the war, I lost many soldiers fighting the same enemy you humans fought. I saw human warriors in battle and they were terrifying. They never stopped, never retreated, never showed mercy." Vex's voice became quieter. "I blamed humans for my losses, even though we were on the same side. I thought your people enjoyed the violence, that you were barely controlled monsters. I was wrong. You lost people you cared about," Daniel said gently. "That kind of pain makes everyone react in ways they normally wouldn't." "I lost my brother," Vex admitted. "He was a fighter pilot. His ship was damaged in battle. A human rescue squad pulled him out before his ship exploded, but he died from his injuries 2 days later. I blamed the humans for not saving him fast enough. I never thanked them for trying." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I lost people too. My sister was a colony defender. She held a position so civilians could evacuate. She saved 300 people, including 50 children. The enemy killed her, but those families lived because of her sacrifice. The two of them stood in silence, sharing the weight of their losses. "We're the same," Vex said finally. "Your sister and my brother. They fought to protect others. That's what warriors do, human or Velkari. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." "That's exactly right," Daniel said. From that day forward, Vex became one of Daniel's strongest supporters in the palace. He started joining the story sessions in the garden, listening from the back. He began telling other Velkari about his conversation with Daniel, helping them understand that human strength was not something to fear, but something to respect. But not everyone was happy about the growing friendship between humans and Velkari. A group of traditionalist nobles watched Daniel's increasing popularity with anger and suspicion. They met in secret, plotting ways to undermine what they saw as dangerous fraternization with a predator species. "The queen has become soft," one noble hissed during a secret meeting. "She lets that human near her daughter, near all our children. She treats him like a friend instead of the threat he is." "We need to remind everyone why humans are dangerous," another agreed. "We need to make them remember fear." They began planning an incident that would expose Daniel's true nature and turn the Velkari against humans once more. They did not account for one thing: Princess Mira's love for her human friend, and her fierce determination to protect him just as he had protected her. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would test everything Daniel and Queen Silvara had built together. But neither of them knew it yet. For now, Daniel sat in the garden surrounded by laughing children, teaching them about a game called Tag, and thinking about how much had changed since his arrival. He had come to the palace as a frightening outsider, barely tolerated and completely isolated. Now he had friends. He had children who hugged his legs and begged for stories. He had a queen who sought his wisdom and counsel. And he had found something he had not expected: a second home among the stars, with people who looked nothing like him but were learning to see past appearances to the person underneath. As Princess Mira climbed into his lap to hear another story, Daniel thought about the long road ahead. There would be challenges, he knew. Not everyone would accept humans as easily as these children had, but for the first time since arriving, he felt genuine hope that humans and Velkari could truly become friends. And sometimes, hope was the most powerful thing in the galaxy. The Galactic Convergence was the biggest diplomatic event in the known universe. Representatives from 40 different species gathered at the palace to discuss trade, peace treaties, and mutual defense agreements. The palace transformed into a hub of activity, with dignitaries arriving daily in ships of every size and design. Queen Silvara was scheduled to give the keynote address on the third day of the convergence. Her speech was supposed to focus on post-war recovery and the importance of continued cooperation between species. She had been working on it for weeks, but the night before her speech, she threw away her entire prepared text and started over. She had something more important to say. Daniel noticed the increase in attention as more species arrived at the palace. Many of them had heard about the human ambassador, and they all had opinions. Some looked at him with fear, others with curiosity, a few with outright hostility. The traditionalist Velkari nobles saw the convergence as their opportunity. With so many species present, an incident involving the human would have maximum impact. They would show everyone that humans could not be trusted, that they were dangerous predators who only pretended to be civilized. They chose the public ceremony on the morning of Queen Silvara's speech. It was a formal event where all the diplomatic delegations would be present, including most of the palace residents and many civilian Velkari who had come to see the historic gathering. Daniel stood in the ceremonial hall with other ambassadors, dressed in his formal diplomatic clothing. Princess Mira was there too, sitting with her mother on the raised platform. The young princess kept waving at Daniel whenever her mother was not looking, making him smile. The ceremony was proceeding normally when 3 Velkari nobles approached Daniel. They positioned themselves around him in what appeared to be a casual conversation circle, but Daniel immediately sensed something wrong. Their body language was aggressive, their antennae pointed in hostile patterns. "Ambassador Hayes," one of them said loudly, making sure nearby people could hear, "we have been discussing the human presence at this palace, and we have concerns." Daniel kept his voice calm and neutral. I'm happy to address any concerns you have through proper diplomatic channels. We prefer to address them now, another noble said, stepping closer. We believe humans are too dangerous to be allowed free access to our palace. You should be confined to your quarters under guard. People were starting to notice the confrontation. Conversations around the hall began to quiet as heads turned their way. I respect your concerns, Daniel said, still keeping his tone peaceful. But I've been invited here by Queen Silvara herself. If you have issues with my presence, you should raise them with her. The Queen has been deceived by your false gentleness, the third noble said, his voice rising. You are a predator. You come from a death world. Your kind kills without remorse. Everyone here should remember what humans really are. The first noble moved even closer, deliberately invading Daniel's personal space. In human culture, this would be seen as an attempt to provoke a fight. Daniel realized what they were doing, trying to make him react with aggression in front of all these witnesses. He took a slow breath and started to step backward, refusing to engage. That's when Princess Mira acted. The young princess had been watching the confrontation with growing anger. She had seen the nobles surround her friend. She had heard them say cruel things about Daniel, and she decided she had heard enough. Mira jumped down from the platform and ran across the ceremonial hall. Before her mother or the guards could stop her, she pushed through the crowd and planted herself directly between Daniel and the nobles. "Leave him alone," she said, her young voice clear and strong. "Daniel is my friend. He saved my life and the lives of other children. He tells me stories and teaches me about Earth. He has never been anything but kind to everyone here. You are being mean and unfair." The hall went completely silent. A royal princess had just publicly challenged 3 nobles in defense of a human. The political implications were enormous. The nobles looked shocked and angry, but they could not push past the princess without physically moving her, which would be unthinkable. Commander Vex was already moving toward them with his guards, his expression dangerous. Queen Silvara stood from her throne, her presence commanding immediate attention. "This ceremony is over," she announced, her voice ringing through the hall. "All delegations will reconvene in 1 hour for my address. Nobles, you will attend me in my chambers immediately." As the crowd began to disperse, Daniel knelt down beside Mira. "Thank you," he said softly. "But you didn't have to do that. I can handle people who don't like me." "You're my friend," Mira said simply. "Friends protect each other. You taught me that." Daniel felt something warm in his chest. This small alien child understood friendship better than many adults. "You're very brave," he told her. "I learned from you," she replied, hugging him quickly before her caretakers whisked her away. 1 hour later, the great hall filled again. Every diplomatic delegation was present, along with palace residents and the visiting Velkari civilians. The chamber could hold thousands, and every space was occupied. News of the morning's incident had spread, and everyone wanted to hear what the Queen would say. Queen Silvara stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled species. She saw fear, curiosity, judgment, and hope in the faces looking back at her. She had thrown away her prepared remarks. What she was about to say came straight from her heart. "I had a different speech prepared," she began. "I was going to talk about trade agreements and military cooperation. Important things, certainly. But this morning's events have shown me that we need to discuss something more fundamental. We need to talk about fear, and about what it means to be truly dangerous." She paused, letting her words settle. "When humans first came to our attention, we feared them. We saw footage of them in battle and were terrified. We heard they came from a death world and assumed they were monsters. We believed we knew what they were. We were wrong." The crowd stirred, murmurs of surprise rippling through the hall. "I do not mean we were wrong to think humans are dangerous," the Queen continued. "They are dangerous. Humans are physically strong, resistant to injury, capable of enduring conditions that would kill most of us. They are fierce warriors who do not retreat in battle. All of this is true. But we were wrong about what that danger means." Queen Silvara's voice grew stronger. "I have watched a human warrior tuck my daughter into bed with a gentleness that made me weep. I've seen a human risk his own life without hesitation to save our children from toxic gas. I have observed a human show more patience and kindness to our young ones than many of our own people have shown." She looked directly at Daniel, who stood at the back of the hall. "Ambassador Hayes, would you please join me?" Daniel walked through the crowd to the podium. He could feel every eye on him, could sense the fear that still existed in many of those watching. But he also felt something new, respect. "Tell them," the Queen said. "Tell them about the Predator's paradox." Daniel looked out at the assembled species and spoke from his heart. On Earth, humans evolved to be dangerous because we had to be. Our world was full of threats and we needed strength to survive. But that same harsh world taught us something else. We needed each other. Alone, a human dies. Together, we thrive. So we learned to be gentle with each other. We learned to care for our weak and our young. We learned that our strength was not for dominating others, but for protecting those who could not protect themselves. Yes, we can fight. Yes, we can be terrifying in battle. But what makes us truly human is not our capacity for violence. It's our choice to use our strength for protection instead of destruction. He paused, then continued. Every species here has something that makes you special. You have abilities and strengths we humans do not have. But we all share one thing. We all value our children, our families, our friends. We all want peace more than war. We all understand that cooperation is better than conflict. I'm not asking you to stop being afraid of what humans can do. Fear can be healthy and wise. But I'm asking you to also see what humans choose to do. Judge us by our actions, not just our potential for harm. Queen Silvara stepped forward again. Ambassador Hayes came to us as a representative of his people. But in the time he has been here, he has become something more. He has become a friend to our children. He has become a trusted advisor. He has become a bridge between our species. This is what I propose to all of you gathered here today. Instead of fearing the differences between our species, let us learn from them. Instead of assuming the worst, let us look for the best. Instead of building walls, let us build friendships. The Queen's voice rang out strong and clear. Yes, humans are scary, but not for the reasons we thought. They are scary because they challenge us to be better. They are scary because they show us that strength and gentleness can exist together. They are scary because they prove that the most dangerous beings in the galaxy can also be the most compassionate. The hall was silent for a long moment. Then slowly someone started a Velkari gesture of approval, a soft tapping of hands on thighs. Others joined in. Soon the entire Velkari section of the audience was making the sound. Then other species added their own forms of approval. Clicks,